The NFL Combine is officially in the books. We're going to go over my top 24 rookie rankings post-Combine right here on the Player Profiler Dynasty channel. Welcome in, folks. Pete Nova here. And for this rankings video today, I'm going to use Lance Zierlein's most recent mock draft post-Combine with those landing spots. He's a draft analyst over at NFL.com. I'm going to use those landing spots for today's video. It should not impact things too much, but landing spots are going to be super important for a lot of players in this draft. We're going to go over 24 players. That's 2 full rankings. As the offseason progresses, this will get larger and larger, but today we'll stick to 24. We'll try to go through some of these quickly, but give you actionable and important information from what we've learned from the Combine and where I sit currently with the rookies in this class. Let's go ahead and move over to the 101, which is pretty obvious. It's going to be Jeremiyah Love. And Jeremiyah Love, look, what can I really say about Jeremiyah Love that's going to change your opinion on this player? If you're not really on board with Jeremiyah Love before the Combine, I didn't think the Combine's going to change your opinion afterwards, but he did test very well at the Combine. When you take a look at his RAS score, if you're not familiar with RAS score, it's raw athletic score. A 40-yard dash, 4.36, which was 9.90 on the RAS score. 20-yard split was 2.54, and the 10-yard split was 1.55 seconds, which is really good, right? I like to look at the 10-yard split most importantly when I'm looking at the Combine data at the 40-yard dash. The 10-yard split is most important for me because it just shows the short area burst and speed that guys have. And generally speaking, we don't see many players running in a straight line for 40 straight yards, where we do see that a little bit more condensed at, like, let's just say 10-yard splits, which is why we like to use that. But he weighed in at 212 pounds, 6 foot, his hand size 9.13, arm length 32 inches, which is pretty solid. When you look at the mean, right, for for hand size, right, it's 9.289, and then when you look at the arm length, 30.922. So he's got really long arms compared to the average player at the position that's been measured for the Combine. And when we talk about Jeremiyah Love, Lance Zierlein has him recently in his mock draft. He's landing, which is not a major surprise. But he's got him going to the Saints at 8, which is where a lot of people are mocking him. And Jeremiyah Love, for me, is a player that I don't think is going to be landing spot dependent, where pretty much almost every single other guy in this class is going to be. There's no real blue chippers. There's a good big 3 for the wide receiver position, but for the most part, Jeremiyah Love is the only guy that I'm not overly concerned about where he goes. His value can go up, but his value won't likely go down at all unless he gets drafted to like Cleveland somehow, who just took Quinshon Judkins, which really wouldn't make a lot of sense. But I don't really need to go over too much with Jeremiyah Love. He was a really good player in college, and I expect him to continue to be a good player in the pros. At the 102, Fernando Mendoza makes a ton of sense in Superflex. If it's not Superflex, I would not be taking him this high, but we're going to assume that this is Superflex. And he goes to Las Vegas Raiders at the 101 in a regular draft. And I'm not expecting any team to jump the shark and do anything crazy where the Raiders end up backing off the pick and giving it to someone else. So he's pretty much a Raider unless something catastrophic happens or there's an insane overpay. And this is a solid landing spot for him. I know it's very sketchy to think of him going to the Raiders because they just haven't really had much success. And it doesn't really feel like the best landing spot, but this is a team that has a lot of cap space. They do have some young offensive players. I think they'll bring in some veterans, though, in the free agency, and they'll spend that money. Even if it's overpaying for some guys, they're going to, insulate that offensive line better than what we saw last year. He weighed in at 236 pounds, which was pretty big. I don't think people were expecting him to come in that heavy. 6'4", so a good height and weight for Fernando Mendoza, and that's really what we were hoping for. Player Profiler has him here at 6'5". He's right in the middle of 6'4", 6'5". But out of Indiana, look, this is a guy that went to the national championship. He just threw 41 touchdowns. I don't need to give you his resume either. It's going to be more important the guys later on that we start talking about. But Mendoza here with Kubiak paired up with him, I honestly think Mendoza's leadership quality, skills, and just overall the vibe that I'm getting with the Raiders and what they're trying to do, I think it's a good match and a good fit and a good pairing. Mendoza, really, really good at figuring out where he needs to go with the football before the snap, pre-snap. Some things that concern me a little bit is him getting to reads later on in the progression, or when defenses maybe show him one thing pre-snap and maybe he misdiagnoses it pre-snap. What does he do when those things aren't there, when the play breaks down? We did see some mobility from him as well in that national championship game, which was nice to see. And overall, I'm excited for Fernando Mendoza. We would, of course, love a more safer, quote-unquote, landing spot, but he's got Brock Bowers. He's got Ashton Genty, and I think that this team is going to spend money on the offensive side of the football and draft capital on that side of the football as well. And I think he's going to be in a good spot to have talent around him and maybe not be a stud year one, but he's a guy that projects to me as a ceiling of around a fringe quarterback one, somewhere on that Jared Goff, Brock Purdy area. Now, Goff has obviously exceeded expectations lately over the last few years, but I think that's kind of where I see him landing for his career in Dynasty and in fantasy, is somewhere around that fringe quarterback one area at the ceiling. Makai Lemon out of USC comes in here at the 103 for me. Lance Zierlein has him projected to go to the Rams. I think that would be a really, really awesome landing spot to, have him there, learn between two really, really good players with Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua. Look, he had some weird interviews. I know people are kind of hung up on it. It's not something that's going to stop me from drafting this kid. He didn't have any character concerns from what I've looked into and read at his time with USC. And this is a guy that I think is going to command a ton of targets right away. He reminds me of Emeka Egbuka when we just talk about players that are going to come in, just game ready, pro ready. That's what Makai Lemon reminds me of. This is a guy that predominantly played in the slot this year. 70.6% of his routes run were in the slot. He then played, 27.9% out wide. Yards after catch, 502, 6.4 yards per after catch per reception is pretty solid. And his yards per route run, 3.13, which is a really, really good number. Usually you want these guys coming in to be at least over 2.5 on their yards per route run, which we know is a very important data point when it comes to projecting players' success for fantasy football at the wide receiver position. When you think about his strengths, though, he's going to be a ball hog. He's going to be a player that's going to be in the slot, understand his leverage, especially versus zone coverage, and just be able to pick spots out and sit down and get open for his quarterback. He'll be a very quarterback-friendly wide receiver in that regard. Some of the weaknesses are, he's a little bit smaller and undersized. He's 5'11". He's under 200 pounds. And, that's going to hurt him a little bit. His hands are a little bit below average in terms of total size. So he doesn't really have that big catch radius that's going to help a quarterback, but he understands his leverage. He gets open. He can separate. He's not the best against physical corners, but playing predominantly in the slot, he's not going to verse a ton of press coverage unless, we're talking about a defense that's, just playing press man across the board, which we don't typically see a ton of defenses run that in the NFL. So I think he's going to be a great zone beater. I think he's going to be successful. I'm excited to draft him. I think he's going to come in, and no matter where he goes, he's going to command targets. I think he's going to be super successful with a very, very high floor. I still think the ceiling is pretty high there, but there's not a lot of risk. And when we talk about this draft class, it is pretty risky. Makai Lemon doesn't come off as a guy, to me, that's someone I feel like I'm taking a big risk on, and the reward is still going to be pretty high, in my opinion. At the 104, Carnell Tate, wide receiver out of Ohio State, lands here for me. Look, people are a little bit concerned about the 40-yard dash. There was some conflicting reports. I know Schefter came out and said that the stopwatches for some of the scouts had Tate actually running faster than what he did at the Combine. Then, the Combine's laser timed. It doesn't really matter what the scouts have. And either way, I'm not overly concerned because Tate's not a guy that wins with blazing speed down the field. This is a guy who's, look, he's a prototypical X wide receiver. He played pretty much 88.9% of his snaps out wide. So he's not a player that's, playing in the slot or, being moved around too much. But look, he's a fast player, 6'2", 192 pounds, junior, right, coming out of Ohio State. And this is a really good player. He's polished. He's got really good body control. I kind of look at him as kind of T. Higgins-esque. That's kind of my comp. I'm not really the best at comps, but I do look at Tate as a T. Higgins kind of player. I do worry sometimes with these big X guys, unless you're a big alpha and you can command those targets. Sometimes those guys, not because they're bad, but they almost become sacrificial. I'm hoping he lands in a good spot. As we talked about, these wide receivers, for the most part, everybody's going to be landing spot dependent, but Lemon I'm a little bit more feeling safer about because I think he can command targets, especially in the slot, no matter where he goes. But with Tate, he could find himself in a situation like Marvin Harrison Jr., where, he becomes that sacrificial guy. And look, Tate doesn't have to be that deep ball threat. He can win intermediate as well. So don't get me wrong about that. He's got really natural hands. He's a guy that sets up his routes really, really well. And yards after catch, 231. So when we talk about it, a lot of his passes and receptions were deep ball, right? I mean, his ADOT was 14.6, his average depth of target. So a lot of his receptions did come deep, but he can win on the intermediate as well. He's a good enough route runner where he doesn't need to win with blazing speed down the field. So I do like Carnell Tate here. His combine didn't really change my opinion on him and his ranking so far. At the 105, it's Jordyn Tyson. And to be completely honest with you, I think Jordyn Tyson is the most gifted wide receiver in this class. And, you might sit here and say, well, then why wouldn't you have him ranked ahead of Lemon and Tate when we don't even have landing spots if he's the most talented? The problem with Tyson for me is the injury concerns. I know people will say, well, it's a lot of freak injuries with the ACL, the hamstring, but he didn't finish an entire season in his college career, or at least he got banged up in his college career pretty much every season. And look, no one's ever fully healthy, but there were a little bit of concerns, and he didn't test, right? He didn't test at the Combine at all because they did say that there was that hamstring that, was still bothering him from the season. And it was the same hamstring of the ACL that he tore. Now, again, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I can project that, he's going to be injury prone. I'm not saying that, but there are some concerns there. But when you look at him, right, a 46.8% college dominator in the 94th percentile, his college target share, 97th percentile with 34.2%. And his breakout age at 18 years old is massive, right? I mean, we can't ignore that when we talk about breakout age and why it's so important, right? These guys, usually if you're an older player and you don't go to the NFL draft, say after your junior season, it's, because maybe you're not talented enough yet, or maybe you haven't gotten, filled out your body correctly, or haven't gotten, whatever the case may be. You get what I'm saying. Whereas a lot of times their senior year, right, it forces them, to maybe be a little bit older versus their competition, right? And they're not considered the best of the best. When a guy has a younger breakout age, it is more important, though, especially if they play at a bigger school. Now, he did play at Arizona State, which is not a small school, and it's good competition. So I like Jordyn Tyson. I think he's got a really good career ahead of him if he can stay healthy. That's really the biggest factor with him. The guy just flat out gets open. This is a really fun player to watch. He's extremely talented, and I'm super excited to see what he does at the next level. At the 106, I have Concepcion, and I really like this guy's tape. I'm almost inclined to have him. I'm trying to find a way to get him inside my top 3 wide receivers. He is my 4th here, but out of Texas A&M, 36.9% college dominator rating, 76th percentile, 26.7 college target share, 80th percentile, and an 18.9 breakout age, which is in the 90th percentile. I mean, he looked really good coming on early on in his career in college, and 21.4 years old. You know, the height and the weight are totally fine. He actually weighed in heavier than people expected, 196 pounds. His height was 6 foot flat. Arm size 30 1/4, and then hand size 9 1/4 inches. So all those are very good markers for Concepcion. And Lance Zierlein has him falling to the New England Patriots, or landing with the New England Patriots inside the first round, which would be the 31st pick. If he gets first round draft capital in an offense like that, I'd be very excited. People might be a little concerned because they think it's a little bit redundant when you think about who they have at the wide receiver position, but I honestly would really like the landing spot. I don't view him as a guy that only can be in the slot. He can be, off ball on the outside as well. He doesn't have to only work in the slot. And this is a player that I fell in love with in the process, watching his tape. He understands his leverage against zone. He can snap off his routes at the top of them on the comebacks and the out routes as well. And he's a good route runner overall. He was a little bit hung out to dry from pretty poor quarterback play, but I'm excited for this guy. I really hope he gets a good landing spot because the talent is there. I think he could be a really good contributor at the NFL level. And when I think about him, right, this is a guy who he's got really good acceleration outside, or once he gets off the line, right, he can win in the short area side of things, right? He's got really good footwork and good separation off the line of scrimmage. So I'm not even concerned when it comes to if he did play against press coverage. Let's say he was on ball, I wouldn't really be concerned about Concepcion because he's just got really good feel off the line of scrimmage. When you look at some of his college numbers, his yards per route run 2.46, so just slightly below that 2.5 marker. But again, I'm not overly concerned. When you look at his average ADOT, 12.3 yards, 440 yards after the catch as well. And this is a guy that when you look at it, he actually lined up out wide 65.3% of the time. So again, people are going to look at him and think, yeah, he's probably more of a slot receiver. He can be an out wide receiver. Now, I don't think he's a prototypical, your big X wide receiver, but he can do it, which makes him versatile, and it's going to get him on the field more, which is a little bit of a concern when you think about the NFL and how teams are going with heavier personnel, and these slot receivers are finding themselves not on the field as more, so they have to really earn those targets when they are on the field. I think Concepcion is going to be a really good pro, and I'm excited to see what he does and where his landing spot goes. At 107, I have Omar Cooper, Indiana wide receiver who was lined up across from Surratt, if you're familiar. And he comes in at 6 foot, his arm size 30 inches and 1/4, hand size 9 5/8, 199 pounds, so good size overall. And this is a player that's gained up a lot of steam, and some people have him higher than KC. Some people probably even have him possibly in their top 3 of the wide receiver position. It wouldn't surprise me. Zierlein has him in the first round going to the Cleveland Browns. That would really not be the best landing spot. When we talk about these guys that, are they landing spot dependent? Most of them are. He runs a 4.42 40-yard dash, which is honestly really, really good. I wasn't expecting him to run that fast. 26.4% college dominator rating, 43rd percentile. So he didn't really command a ton of targets on his team. Surratt was really more of the focal point in this offense consistently to move the chains. But he was still really, really involved. The 21.2% college target share, 55th percentile, 21.7 breakout age, which, you kind of sit there and be like, I'd like that to be a little bit better, but it's not a concern. I mean, he's only a junior coming out here, so that's not overly concerning. He's 22.2 years old. Sorry, well, technically a junior because he was a redshirt freshman. But Omar Cooper here at the 107, I think he's a player that, can win at pretty much all levels of the field. He's not going to be the guy that's going to beat you over the top, but he's going to be a guy that can kind of finesse you, right? I mean, he posted 20 touchdown catches since the start of the 2024 season, so he did get into the end zone. He's pretty much versatile, right? He can be more than a slot option, and honestly, he's a player that is tough. He plays physical, and I think he can be a good pro. I like him at the 107. I know a lot of people have him a little bit higher than I do. I do have him higher than Sadiq, but I like Omar Cooper here at the 107. At the 108, we have Kenyon Sadiq, who arguably was one of the biggest winners of the NFL Combine. He weighs in at 241 pounds, height 6'3", out of Oregon. And, I don't want to double count here with Kenyon Sadiq. I think most people expected him to have an elite Combine performance. He was arguably the best performer at the Combine, a 4.39 40-yard dash, a 1.54 second, 10-yard split, 43.5 vertical jump. The broad jump was 11.1. 26 in the bench press. I mean, he tested really well. This is a guy that I think you expected to test well. This is an element or an environment that he was always going to do good in. If he didn't do good in it, you might be a little bit concerned. But I don't want to double count here. When you look at Sadiq, a lot of people have concerns about the yards, per route run at 1.62. This is, a guy that's being mocked in the first round. Lance has him going to the Philadelphia Eagles in the first round. I think that would be an awesome landing spot. The Eagles would be a lot of fun. It looks like Dallas Goedert could be on his way out, and we've seen Dallas Goedert be extremely successful in this offense. Jalen Hurts likes to go to him, especially down at the goal line at the red zone. I think those are plays that they're going to keep in, even with the new coaching staff there. I don't have Sadiq higher because, to be completely honest with you, unless it's a tight end premium, I just don't value tight ends extremely high. If you're familiar with my work, I talk about the drop off and the separation between the elite tight ends and then everybody else. And there's just not a ton of separation. If you're convinced, though, that Sadiq is going to be an elite guy and has that ability to be inside the top 5 on a consistent year in, year out basis, then yeah, I think he's a good pick. And I'm not doubting his talent, but the odds and the numbers say to me that that's not very likely. Not because of his skill set, but just overall, we've seen the tight ends that there's only like 2 to 3 guys every year that are consistently up there, like the Kelce's. Now you have the Bowers, you have the Trey McBrides, you have the George Kittles, right? And it's just, you have to be extremely consistent. You have to be in a great situation to put up those kinds of numbers. And I just think Omar Cooper and KC have a higher chance to be more impactful for your dynasty rosters on a week in, week out basis. But I still really like the profile on him. And I think, if he lands with the Eagles, it'd be an awesome landing spot. So I have him here at the 108. At the 109, I have Denzel Boston out of Washington, who really, I know we have some PTSD because there haven't really been good, successful wide receivers out of Washington that have at least been impactful, right? Obviously, you have the Roma Dunzeys, but we just really haven't had that guy coming out of Washington that's been what the hype has brought him up to be. I do like Denzel Boston, though. This is a player that has just a nose for the end zone. 37.9% college dominator rating inside the 78th percentile, 28.7 college target share, 86th percentile, and a breakout age of 20.8 years old. Again, those are all good markers for what we're looking for at the wide receiver position in our prospects. And with Boston, my comp for him is Courtland Sutton. I do see a lot of Sutton in his game. I think they're both very similar. Boston has elite ball skills, right? I mean, he doesn't have that athletic freak, with that speed profile that maybe some people are looking for, that top end speed. But in a way, I actually don't hate that, right? Because he's a guy that will be relied on in the red zone to catch touchdowns. And sometimes these speed guys, they tend to be one-trick ponies. In Boston, I just don't see that with him. He's a player, right? When you look at his statistics, 4.9 yards, yards after catch per reception, you'd want that to be higher. His average ADOT, 14.4. So a lot of deep balls, which we know, a 2.44 yards per route run. Again, not as high of a marker as I would like. And these are some of the reasons I don't have him ahead of Concepcion and Omar Cooper, who I think that's the next tier, right? So the first tier is those big three of guys where you have Lemon, Tate, and Tyson. And then you have this next three tier here with Concepcion, Omar Cooper and Denzel Boston. I think that's pretty comfortable for me, where you start to kind of round out where the next crop of guys land. But with Boston, I mean, this is a player that, like I said, has a knack for the end zone. Testing wise, I mean, he's a 6'4" physical freak in terms of just his size at 212 pounds. He's filled out very well top to bottom, right? He's not like a very lanky guy. He is built well from top to bottom. Hand size 9 3/4. Arm 32 inches, which is really, really good for the wide receiver position. And when you just look at the production for him, he was just really, really productive in college. You look at the touchdowns, 9 and then 11 over the last 2 years, 20 touchdowns overall. And I hope he finds a good landing spot, right? Again, when you talk about these X-style wide receivers, you hope they're not sacrificial, and you hope they find an offense that's creative that will get them the football. But I think Denzel Boston, I want to have him higher, but some of the metrics, I don't know that he'll be used underneath enough, and could be a guy that is relied on in the medium to deep ball too much, where you're really going to have him on a good offense. It's going to be a little bit landing spot dependent, not because he's not a good player, but just because of the skill set and the way it would translate to fantasy football. But I have him here at this spot at the 109. I think it's a comfortable spot for him. I also do have to mention Boston mocked to the Buffalo Bills, where everybody's always sitting here saying, oh, this free agent, this guy's getting a trade to the Bills. Boston would be a nice almost reroll. I'm not saying he's what Kenyon Coleman they hope for him to be, but he's a guy that would give them finally a big-time playmaker in the red zone, a good option for Josh Allen, where a guy that Allen could pretty much throw the football up and just give him a chance. So I think that'd be an awesome landing spot for Denzel Ball. At the 110, the man that stole the combine, Mike Washington, a player that I've been high on this entire process. And, when we talk about double counting, I try not to double count. I have said since early January that this is the Senior Bowl and then the Combine were going to be two huge events for Mike Washington and places that he would show up very, very well. He did so. And I don't want to double count, but I don't think anybody was expecting Mike Washington to do what he did, at the NFL Combine, running a 4.33 40-yard dash at his size, 6'1", 223 pounds. I mean, look, arm size 33 and 5/8. I mean, this guy is massive. Now he is a senior. So when you talk about that break, that age and kind of how we start to fit those variables in, that's you kind of would have hoped he could have broke out a little bit sooner. But the important thing is, if we scroll down here, look, Buffalo for 3 years, obviously redshirted. Then he went to New Mexico. It wasn't a good fit for him in New Mexico. He talks about it in an interview this past offseason. It just didn't work out. And then he went to Arkansas. He stepped up and had his best season of his career in college at an SEC school, right, with Arkansas. So, I mean, 9 total touchdowns. He caught 28 passes, 226 receiving yards, 11% target share, and he had 1,068 yards on 168 rushing attempts, 6.4 yards per carry. And look, I'm going to stick with my guns here with Mike Washington. I liked him a lot. And some of the guys that I wanted or had a little bit higher, like Jadarian Price and Emmett Johnson, they didn't test nearly as well. I'm not dinging them completely. It's just a matter of Mike Washington had such a phenomenal combine and weighed in really well. I mean, you don't see guys his size moving that well on the field. And the beautiful thing is he's a guy that can catch the football. He catches the football and gets upfield. We saw that at the Senior Bowl. He can get upfield fluidly, which is going to translate, I think, in the NFL and for fantasy. The bigger concern for him is the fumbles, which, he's got to get those cleaned up. And that's not going to get him on the field at the NFL level, and obviously draft capital. It's really the biggest thing is draft capital, right? Where do these NFL teams see these players? At the 111, I have Emmett Johnson here. I'm very curious to see how the NFL values him. He's not a 3-down workhorse at the NFL level, and so he might not get that draft capital that we would really, really hope for. Size-wise, he's not a big player, 202 pounds, 5'10". The 40-yard dash was not impressive, right? 4.56 40-yard dash. People expected him to run faster. He doesn't really have that long breakaway speed. He's elusive, though, in the open field and is a really good receiver out of the backfield. 25.38 missed tackles forced per run. So he is explosive in that regard. He can make guys miss in the open field. And he caught a lot of passes in college, 92 receptions for 703 yards. He had a 1.15 yards per route run, which is really, really good. It's one of the higher markers of the guys in this class. 22.4 years old out of Nebraska. He played against some really good competition. So I have him here at the 111. I'm not going to freak out, but draft capital is going to be really, really important for him at the end in his NFL future, and especially for dynasty fantasy football. To close out the first round at the 112, the 12th overall ranked player, it's going to be Ty Simpson. Look, it's a quarterback-driven league, especially in Superflex fantasy football, and Ty Simpson's getting, projected to be a first round player, right? He comes in, didn't put on as much weight as we had hoped, 211 pounds, 6'1", hand size 9, which is totally fine. QBR in college, 76. And really the biggest thing with Ty Simpson, and I'll show you here, is really just the game started, right? I mean, he started 15 games, and it's really just wasn't a huge sample size for him. 28 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, not an extremely impressive or athletically gifted player, but this is a floor quarterback, right? This is a guy who extremely smart, good mental processing, in my opinion. They showed a video of him at the combine where he went over his longest play, and he wasn't even prepared for it. And he gave out an interview answer about the longest play, and he just recited it. I mean, this guy is clearly not going to have trouble picking up a playbook, which is a very big stepping stone and hurdle for the NFL level, especially running NFL-style offenses compared to college. He should be prepared and ready for that at the next level. And look, quarterbacks are super important. Ty Simpson gets drafted first round, and he gets that capital. We've seen quarterbacks, heck, J.J. McCarthy in some aspects. Now he's probably somewhere around like the 201 now, but when he tore his ACL his first year as a rookie and didn't play, he still was valued in the top 6 for rookie picks from last year's class. So like these guys, these quarterbacks that drafted first round, they hold value. And if you don't make out well with Simpson, you can just re-roll, but there's not a lot of safe players that are going to provide much insulation in this class, and Ty Simpson's one of them. And look, Simpson didn't look great down the stretch, but they did come out and say that he had a severe case of gastritis, which made him lose a lot of weight that he was struggling with, and that's probably why he still hasn't weighed. He didn't weigh in as heavy as people expected at the combine, but it's something that came out during the Senior Bowl, and it's something worth noting and worth keeping an eye on. But I'll take him here to close out the first round, and he'll be my 12th player off the board just because of positional value. At the 201, the 13th player off the board, it's going to be Jadarian Price out of Notre Dame. And a lot of people were knocking this kid. Him and Emmett Johnson just kind of felt like the punching bags of the running back room from the combine. He runs a 4.49, which is fine. I mean, I understand he came in at 203 pounds. I think people were expecting him to be a little bit bigger because he is a physical runner, but he's not just a physical runner. When you look at the numbers here, a 25.26% missed tackle force rate at the college level and a 19.21% explosive percentage, which is runs of 10 or more yards. 19% of his rushes were 10 or more yards. I mean, he did have that explosion, and I think that's going to carry over to the NFL level. I know people are hung up on thinking he's going to be, a power back. That's not what he is. I don't know what people were seeing on tape. I'm not worried about the 203 pounds. And look, the 4.49, people might have expected him to be faster, but at the end of the day, a 4.49 is a fine 40-yard dash. Right? I mean, we're just so used to these guys running extremely fast. I'm not super worried about the 40-yard dash. I told you that the 10-yard splits are more important. And to be completely honest, this guy is a player that knows how to get upfield and has that burst. His yards after catch per reception, 13.5. So he can catch the football and get upfield. Now, he didn't have a ton of receptions in college, so you'd hope that profile gets a little bit better. He caught 15 passes, 162 yards. The limited receiving upside is a little bit of a concern, but we saw when he gets the ball, he gets upfield and gets yards. It's just a matter of we didn't see a big enough sample size in college for him to do that, but I still like him here at the 201. I'm not freaking out about him. I think he's going to be a really nice value. Excited to see where he goes. I think some places that would be maybe a good landing spot for him could be, Atlanta, maybe not for fantasy, but in general, I think replacing a guy like Tyler Algier, that could be a good landing spot. Denver would be a good landing spot as well. He could be more of an early down back to complement RJ Harvey, who's more of that receiving back. But the lack of receiving in his profile is a little bit of what makes me a little more cautious with him for fantasy purposes. Landing spots can be extremely important. You're going to continue hearing me say that. The other thing I want to say about Price, and you'll notice I haven't been giving out the landing spots because, Zerline only did one round. When Daniel Jeremiah comes out with Dane Brugler, those would be even more important and ones that hold a little bit more weight in my opinion. I still love Lance, but I like those guys and what they do a little bit more. But Price was being projected, to sneak into the first round. I mean, if NFL teams like that guy that much and those guys that are plugged in who have those sources have him ranked that high potentially, there's got to be some smoke there, and less teams were thrown off about the combine. I still think he has a chance to get some really, really high capital, and that will change a lot of things and where people rank him, when rookie draft season does come, which is coming close. At the 202, I have Jonah Coleman out of Washington, 22.5 years old, and he did not test. He didn't run the 40-yard dash, do any of the agility drills. He did do the bench press, 22 reps, 5'8", 220 pounds. I mean, he's a big, big player. He's physical. And I think with him, the reason I have him here at the 202 is I just didn't really love his tape his senior year versus, what he did the year prior. I know a lot of people are in on him. His missed tackles forced per run, 31.21%, which is the highest of all the big time running backs in this class. So he does know how to make guys miss, and that's over his career. I just didn't really see it a lot on tape. It just didn't feel like it translated as much as it did on the spreadsheet. Explosive run rate, 16.69, and that's the same thing. I didn't really see that big explosion from him. Maybe I'm missing something. If you saw something different on the tape, let me know. But I have him here in this spot. I think he's going to be a player that's going to be able to catch passes. So the receiving profile is there, 88 receptions, 825 yards, 109 targets in his college career, 1.22 yards per route run. I like Jonah Coleman. I just like the other running backs in this class a little bit better. The combine didn't change too much for me. He didn't really test like we thought he would, which is a little bit of a bummer. I think some of these guys are getting advice. If you're not going to test extremely well on the speed drills, then don't test at all. At the 203, I have Eli Stowers, another guy that really wowed at the combine. A 4.51 40-yard dash, speed score, 114.9, 96 percentile, and 147.1 on his burst score. Because I mean, if you looked at what he did, I mean, his numbers were staggering. The broad jump 11 and 3. 45.5 vertical jump, which was, I mean, astronomical for a guy that size. He's 6'4", 239 pounds. He's got the size. Maybe you hope a little bit heavier in the weight department, but he's not going to be a guy that's going to, I think he's going to be more of a guy that's not on the line of scrimmage more, which can limit some of these guys. There's been a big discussion lately of tight ends and how they get on the field. And sure, they could be target earners when they're there, but if they're not on the field enough, right, then it kind of limits the upside because the volume's not there as much. But still, they could have a high target rate when they're on the field. But with Stowers out of Vanderbilt, a lot of people will talk about his early years, and he really didn't break onto the scene until his age 21 season. We had 638 receiving yards on 49 catches, but he still commanded 76 targets, 64.5% catch rate, 5 touchdowns with Diego Pavia. And then, this past year, 61 receptions, 765 yards, a 21.3% target share. So that went down a little bit, but the catch rate did go up, and he had 1 less touchdown this year. I like Eli Stowers. I don't rate a lot of tight ends very high, but this is a good tight end class. And, there's more holes in the guys below him's game. And I think ultimately, I think NFL teams are going to really, really like him. He tested really, really well. I wasn't certainly not expecting that. And at his size, with his height, and his range, I think he could be a really, really good player at the next level. And he projects to probably be a fringe tight end 1. Maybe he can crack inside that tight end 1. Probably maybe towards that like tight end 10 area. It is probably the ceiling for him. I don't see him being better than that, but he's also athletically gifted. So, the ceiling could be higher. You could definitely argue that. But I have him here at this spot, which would be the 203. And let's keep it moving. At the 204, I have Germie Berndard, wide receiver out of Alabama. 23.4% college dominator rating, 22.7% college target share, a 21.8 breakout age. He ran a 4.48, solid. His speed score 102.3. Burst score a little bit low. Not super concerned. Agility score was solid as well. He's got a decent catch radius, and he weighed in at 206 pounds, 6'1", good arm length at 30 inches. And this is a player, if you look at college last year at the wide receiver position, there were only 28 wide receivers, that had at least 100 targets, and he was one of them, right? He commanded targets. He was Ty Simpson, or at least one of his best friends in that regard. His yards per reception, 13.5. He had 7 total touchdowns. His yards after catch per reception is 6.2. So not bad at all. That's a solid marker. 1.70 yards per route run. That's the concerning thing for him. You worry how much better can he get in that area. And with the yards per route run, again, we talk about how important of a metric that is. It's one that's very, very indicative of fantasy success. When you look at what else he did, he had a 32.5 vertical jump, a 10.5 broad jump, the 3-cone at 6.71 seconds, the 20-yard shuttle 4.31, and a 1.52 10-yard split, which is good. That is really good. And look, he's a versatile wideout. He's got good size. He's got good hands. He can play inside and outside, which is going to be something that NFL teams like at the next level. He's somebody who, needs to be a little bit better when it comes to physicality, right? He struggles a little bit off of press when it comes to just bigger and physical corners. But overall, he's got good footwork as well. He's smooth when it comes to just working through on his, working through the zone. And I happen to like him. I'm not overly high on him. I think this is a good spot for him. I think people have him a little bit higher than I do, but out of Alabama, commanding those targets like he did in a big time conference is big for me and something that I like to look at. Even though, look, the yards per out run is a little bit lower than I had hoped. I have him here in this spot. At the 205, I have Jacoby Lane. He didn't make a ton of noise at the Senior Bowl, but did have a really solid combine. Comes in at 6'4", 32 5/8 arm length, 10-inch hands, 10.5-inch hands, 200 pounds. You'd like that weight to be a little bit bigger at 6'4", but not a concern really at all. It's a solid weight. I don't want to make too much of that, but a 1.58 10-yard split, 4.47 40-yard dash. He looked really good, especially in the in some of the drills on the field, catching the football. I think ultimately this is a player that, look, he can make really good late adjustments with quick grabs. He's somebody who, was a focal point in the red zone. And he was across from Makai Lemon, 24.0% college dominator rating, 21.4% college target share, a 20.1 breakout age out of USC. We look at some of the numbers here: 12 receiving touchdowns in 2024, and then 4 receiving touchdowns in 2025. The big thing with him is he really didn't command a very large target share, and so that, I would have liked to be a little bit higher. 76 targets this past year, 49 receptions. But look, the fact is he was next to Makai Lemon, who is a first-round pick in this class, and we know is a target hog. But I like him ranked here, at the 205. He's somebody that I definitely raised up a little bit in my rankings after the combine, just seeing how fluid he looked on the field. He didn't really make much noise at the Senior Bowl, but he did make a little bit of noise, this year at the combine. So I moved him up a little bit in my ranking. At the 206, Nicholas Singleton, look, he didn't test. Unfortunately, he hurt his foot at the Senior Bowl. And this is a very polarizing player. He's really starting to now become somewhat of an afterthought when people talk about this rookie class because of the foot injury, because of the down year in college this year. He had a running back mate in Kaytron Allen that really ended up being more productive this year. But look, when you look at Singleton, he had a down year statistically, finishing with just 546 total yards, his lowest output of his career. He still averaged 4.4 yards per carry and holds a 5.5 yards per carry mark over his career. This is a guy that broke out as a freshman, at a Power 5 conference, scoring 12 rushing touchdowns, and posted an elite 4.58 yards per after contact per attempt. So to me, that kind of production matters. His career metrics, he's a guy that punched in 54 total touchdowns, 3.44 yards after contact per attempt over his career, and 1.38 yards per route run. To me, I want to roll the dice on a guy that's 6 foot, 219 pounds. I know he's physically and athletically gifted. He had a down season. Got news for you. Drew Aller got hurt. This Penn State team was kind of a mess all over. And while, yes, Kaytron Allen was more successful than Singleton, and he was able to get it done a little bit more, Singleton didn't look great on tape this year. But I'm not giving up on this talent, guys. I mean, this is a class that's not extremely talented. This is a player that can be a 3-down back in the NFL, and we know has the talent. So honestly, I think Singleton's going to be a really awesome value, and I have him ranked here at the 206. And honestly, I think he's going to be a steal in drafts. And I'm hoping he gets good draft capital. There's a potential that he could test, the week before the combine. Hopefully he can, to help his draft stock, so we get some better draft capital for him. But I'm not giving up on this player. Next up, we have Chris Bell out of Louisville, 207. And Chris Bell is an interesting case. I mean, unfortunately, he was putting together his most productive year. He ended up tearing his ACL. He's a big, talented player, physically gifted, big target radius. With him, he's somebody who, can be a boundary player with his big target, big frame. It's going to be really, how does he come back from this injury? how does the NFL, do they take a chance on him, right? Is he going to be a guy that gets day 2 capital? I'm not so sure. Probably more of a day 3 guy, in my opinion. Obviously, the ACL tear late in the 2025 season really hurts him. He's not really the most polished guy. He doesn't have that short area quickness. He's really just a big physical dude. When you look at him, he's 6'2", 222 pounds, 31-inch arms, 10-inch hand size. I mean, he's a big player. And honestly, I'm interested to take a shot on him. Draft capital is going to be important. How do NFL teams view him post injury here? But I like taking a chance on him. I don't have a ton to say about him. Overall, I do like some of my big X kind of receiver, these big boundary guys. He's got a really big catch radius. And I'm just hoping that he can come back off of that injury and be successful, because he's a big player. He can break tackles. And honestly, I think ultimately, if he can get back and be healthy, and if he was healthy, he would have a definite strong chance to be, a high day 2 pick, in my opinion. Next up, we're going to talk about Antonio Williams, wide receiver out of Clemson, 5'11" and a half, 187 pounds. You'd like to be a little bit bigger, but 30 and 3/4 inch arms, 9 and 1/4 hand size. With Antonio Williams, I mean, he's just a really good football player. He did deal with some injuries, in Clemson in his 2023 and 2025 season. But he's got really good wiggle. He can move really fluid. He can just kind of, fake out defenders, shows really good tempo and change of pace, with his, routes run, and just kind of sets up his defenders to get open. He's got really good, just run after catch. And when you look at some of the numbers for him, with his production in college, he's a guy that, produced at the college level, at a big time college, right? And so when you check it out, 2.27 yards per route run for him. He's somebody who had 611 yards this season. And again, he did deal with some injuries, 4 touchdowns. He gets 55 catches on 72 targets. So he did command the football in a unique way, and 320 yards after catch. Pretty good. So he's somebody that I'm keeping an eye on. I am curious, with his size, how NFL teams will view him. Is he a slot only kind of player at the next level? He played 265, snaps in the slot this past year. So, with the NFL kind of moving towards some of these bigger players, is he talented enough to get on the field? I mean, 93% of his snaps were inside the slot. So, that's going to limit him getting on the field, but still a really nice player. And, I'd like to see where he goes, but that's why I have him here at the 208 spot. Next up, we have Kaytron Allen, running back out of Penn State, Nick Singleton's running mate, and the guy that was the more productive player this season for Penn State. 5'11", 216 pounds, 21.1 years old. It's 6.2 yards per carry in his college career, which is pretty dang good. 30.9% college dominator rating, and a 6.8% college target share, which not great. That's not really his game. If you look at what he did in his college career, 18 receptions, 14 and 20. He did have 15 total touchdowns and then 10 the year before that. So he did have a knack for finding the end zone. And when he did catch the football, 153 yards in 2024, 8.4 yards per, 8.5 yards per reception. Sorry, we're going long here, guys. I'm dying out here. Sorry about that. But 1,108 rushing yards in 2024, 1,300 yards in 2025. Look, he had a great season. I'm still more of a believer in Nicholas Singleton. He did weigh in at 216 pounds. So that's good. The speed wise, look, this is not a guy that's going to have elite speed at the NFL level. I don't think he's going to be a game changer. I don't really feel like when I watch him play, I don't feel like he's got good bend and balance, but I don't really feel like he's got that burst to get through to the second level. he's not very elusive in my opinion. He doesn't have that great twitch in the lateral movement and cuts. So that's why I don't really have him higher, because I just don't see him being a difference maker. I see him really more as a role player at the next level, but I've been wrong before. Chris Brazzell is going to be the next player on my list here at the 210. He's kind of a polarizing player right now in the space. A lot of people look at the helmet sticker, look at Tennessee and say, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And this is a guy, look, 4.37 40-yard dash. He's got really, really good speed. Speed score was 96th percentile, 6'4", 198 pounds, which is good size. You'd hope him to be a little bit bigger weight-wise, but it's fine. 22.4 years old, the breakout age at 20 years old. And, when you look at some of the numbers for him, 2.57 yards per out run is a good metric. It's a good number, right? We're looking at that threshold of usually around that 250 mark or 2.50, and he's just above that. So that's good to see. 244 yards after catch, 4 yards after catch per reception. So while he's got that speed, he just doesn't have that elusiveness, in my opinion, in the open field to make guys miss. But look, he had 1,000 yards. He had 16.5 yards per reception, 9 touchdowns. Just really a lot of it had to be, kind of on deep balls, right? He didn't really make a ton of guys miss. 80.5% of his routes run were out wide. So he's going to really predominantly be that field stretcher, that burner. And there's never teams never can never have enough guys that can kind of burn you down the field. But I guess he's really kind of more of like an off ball, not really that prototypical X, right? Really kind of more that off ball Z, because, he can't really, he can't get off the press as well. But he's got really, really good footwork. He displays some pretty good breaks in the intermediate. He's not just a go ball guy. I know I kind of alluded to that, but that's kind of how I see him more at the NFL level. I don't think he's polished enough to be that guy that's consistently used intermediate and in the short area. But I mean, honestly, I think he could be a good player. He could maybe break the mold for Tennessee. So I have him here at the 210. Jamari Taylor out of Virginia, honestly, one of my sneaky players in this NFL class for the rookies at the running back position. I think the NFL is going to like him more than fantasy guys do. 23.9 in terms of his age, 5'10", 199 pounds. Just a guy that's just a really good all-around back. I think he's going to be a player that teams just like in the NFL. He's a guy that can go get you the yards that you need, 4.8 yards, per carry in the college level, 27.2% college dominator rating. When you look at the forced tackles missed, 24.05% more missed tackles forced per rush. He had some explosive plays, 12.56% explosive run rate, which is really, really good at the end at the college level. And, he had good yards after contact, 3.4 yards after contact. With him, you kind of look at him as really like a prototypical early down back. But when you really look at it, I mean, he is a player that had 94 receptions in college, so he can catch the football effectively. 1.4 yards per route run, which was number 3 in the big top 15 running backs in this class. That's ranked number 3 out of those guys. So I like Jamari Taylor. I think he's a guy to keep an eye on in this class. I don't think he should be a guy that you take extremely high, but the 211, I really, really like what I've seen. So that's where I'm going to take him. And last but not least, at the last pick here, 24th overall, the 212 to close out the second round, it's going to be Garrett Nussmeier for me out of LSU, 6'2", 203 pounds, 30-inch arms, hand size 9 1/8 inches, which is totally fine. I guess realistically, the way I look at Nussmeier, I think he can be a riser through the process if he has a good pro day. This is a guy that I truly think has a chance to sneak into the back of the first round if teams are desperate enough and somebody falls in love with him. We saw him flash a lot of potential in 2024, and coming into this season, he was regarded as one of the top quarterbacks in this class. It's important to note that this guy got injured, in camp, and really never got healthy the rest of the season. And it was pretty obvious that he was, not healthy, throughout the year, right? He just didn't look like himself, but he's got really good arm talent. In my opinion, he can put the ball in tight windows. Obviously, he played through pain. I mean, he literally played the entire year injured. So I just like Nussmeier. I think a team's going to fall in love with him. I'm not saying this guy's going to be a stud at the NFL level. When we talk about super flex, we talk about the possibility of a team drafting him at the back of the first, maybe sometime early day 2. I think a team could fall in love with him, and he could also find himself in a good situation, maybe backing up a Matthew Stafford if they decide to, draft their predecessor, some guy to develop. Could be Nussmeier. I think if he goes to a situation where he doesn't have to start right away or just finds a good coaching staff, I think he could be successful and a good asset for Dynasty. That's going to do it for me, guys, though. Thank you so much for watching. This was a long one, so I really do appreciate it. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the new channel here at Player Profiler, and I'll see you guys next time.